Namaskara. So, how was the Vyasaraja Samsthana's function?
It was
It
good,
was
sir.
good, sir.
Oh, good, good.
This
Thanks.
the old
Old
building
building
have
have
we have there is a new matha now which houses 8 old Mula Brindavanas and one Mritika Brindavana of Vyasaraja Tirthura himself. Vyasa Tirthura himself. So that's why it was an important occasion.
Great time. So, I've been thinking, a couple of points came to my mind when we want to continue the conversation. I will mention this as a kind of a poster. You can obviously decide when you want to address it. If you want right away, it's fantastic. Because I thought we are moving first establishing, you try to establish why epistemology is needed first, and then we go for ontology. You slowly and deliberately you lay the groundwork as to how we can only know what is beyond our senses through um,
Agama.
agamas, and obviously experience is important, but unless that experience is corroborated by valid Shastra or Agama, that experience runs the risk of being potentially a imagination, or something like that. Therefore, we always like to have a validated thing. And in that context, we started looking at in which case, what exactly is Agama? What is a Shastra which we can take as a Sabda Pramana? And there we went to probably looking into Vedas and said why the apaurishatya. I have difficulty pronouncing that word. Yeah, unoriginated, as we say in English, is so important. And you explained it, and you took two directions. One, is it because nobody is able to clearly tell who is the author, asmarana, like what Mimamsaka say, and you say, no, it's not true because of prasiddhi, because of thousands or hundreds of years, reputed people have said it is unoriginated. Is that's how you said? Okay, taken by itself, it's okay. It seems a nice, neat little argument, acceptable argument. But the point of fact is, why is so important that it has to be Purushatva? Why? Why should it be unoriginated? What is the problem if somebody is able to come, oh, you know what, in 6000 BC, this person called Ganesha Bhatta wrote this. So what? Should we not worry more about the content and the message of the Agama rather than have split over the authorship or non-authorship? That is the one thing which I think it will be very important for you to explain, because the viewers would like to know why are we spending so much time on this, right? That is one thing. And in connection with that, anyway, we're moving towards Agama, etc. Maybe I'm jumping then. What? Since you showed the slide last time, I want to ask this question. You showed a slide where I think I'm assuming it's Srimad Acharya's quotation. Rigadhya Bharatam Chaiva Pancharatram Athakilam. Moola Ramayanam Chaiva Puranam Cha Etad Atmakam. Yecha Anuyayinaha Tvesham Sarvetecha Sadagama. He's kind of giving a list of Sadagamas. Duragam Yete na Jneo Janardana. So he's trying to argue whatever does not help you to understand Janardana is Duragama. Yeah? Yetena Jneo Janardana, that is Duragama. Ye Etai Sudayuktai Bhakti Bhakti Sunishtitai Nacha Kevala Tarkena na Akshajena na Kenachit. Kevala Agama Vigneyo Bhaktereva Nacha Anyataha. This, I think there are two parts to this conversation. This sloka you mentioned, quotation you mentioned. One is defining what are all sadagamas, and the reason for definition of These are all Sadhagamas is because what is not helping to know Janardana is not a good Agama. In my view, that is a very, very arbitrary statement.
Circular also.
Yeah. So I am not very comfortable with the argument. It gives a viewpoint to me, understanding to me, maybe erroneous, that Srimad Ananda Tirtha Muni is already, judge first trial later. He's already decided Janardana is supreme. And then he goes around looking for evidence. That's how it looks like, this argument. This is something which we need to explain. And why knowing Janardana is litmus test is something which you have to be properly explained. Otherwise, it looks very, very, very arbitrary. But what I like is, Nacha kevala tarkena akshijena kenacha. That is very important. Only by logic and argument you cannot know. You need a combination of agama vigno bhaktereva. Need to have a combination of Shastra Gnana as well as a bhakti is required. Dry logic will not help, seems to be his corollary, which seems to be acceptable, but it kind of adds to his previous point of Janardana Geyo. I think he seems to be obsessed with Janardana knowledge as the only means of validating not everything. That I think is a little stretching his point, his argument too. I don't think anybody's got a dispute Vishnu Tattva or anybody. Even Advaitis don't have any problem Vishnu Tattva being supreme, etc. But why is so obsessing with that as a request? That is one objection I have. Another objection is, unlike Shankara, who tends to travel within that Prasthanatraya, he very rarely goes to any Purana and Vajratra and things like that, and probably somewhere he even criticizes them. Whereas he is including everything, Mula Ramayanam, Puranam, everything. That is why I have a feeling, unless he takes Purana, etc., leave alone some of the literature which is quoting, nobody knows where it is, forget that. Even others know, that means he is kind of looking for evidence for his ab initio conclusion. So it makes Srimad Ananda Tirtha Muni more as a, what shall we say, forgive me for saying, I will get 1,008 sins for saying this, it doesn't look like a jignasa from his side. No open inquiry. I like Vishnu, I look for evidence for that, and everything is bad, seems to be the argument. Therefore, if you are making, in the first part of our conversation, if you are making that experience corroborated by valid agama is the means, only that experience you can take, and then cleverly argue agamas which support your proposition, it seems to be a biased logic argument to me. Therefore, both these questions, A, why so much fuss about unorthodox of Vedas, etc. And secondly, why has such a loaded definition of agama? These are the 2 points which I think is very, very important, because this does not sound so strong in from the Tarka point of view. I leave it to you.
Sure. I will start now. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Narasimho Akhilajnana Matadhvanta Divagaraha Jayatyamita Sajnana Sukha Shaktipayonidhi Abhramam Bhangarahitam Ajadam Vimalam Sada Anandatirthamatulam Bhaje Tapatrayapaham Apadamaudi Paryantam Gurunam Akritim Smaret Tena Vignaha Pranashyanti Siddhyanti cha Manorathaha. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Good questions. So I will answer the first one. So the reason for, I think what I could do is, to take, in fact, I had prepared a slide for just this, to take some glimpses from Acharya's Vishnu Tattva Vinirnaya itself. And let me share my screen. You need to give me a minute for doing that. Then I will come to why it is important for us. And yeah. I will share my screen. You're able to see the screen, right?
It's come now, yes.
Yeah, so this is where we were. We basically said that ontology is something we use the epistemology, sources of this knowledge, and whatever interpretation we have of any of these three inputs, it cannot conflict with, it cannot override these things which our consciousness, which is our sakshi, has accepted as valid and has beyond any question. So we said that, and then we came to this agama thing. So here, I could go into this. Basically, we said that Acharya mentions, akartrukatva prasiddhi. Basically, something which Mimamsaka and folklore, which don't have that characteristic. One thing which in fact, my family, when they heard all of this, they said that this is a very wrong, what do you call, reason, kartuhu asmaranat. So I told them, no, it's not as simplistic as how I made it out to be. Basically, their point is that, if it is so important, right, Veda is very important to the Bharatiya Janata, right? I mean, in the sense that we invest a lot of time, effort, and money in carrying out the injunctions and prohibitions that are mentioned in the Veda or the allied literature. There is we carry or we conduct sacrifices, where there is a lot of money, there are a lot of people coming in. There is a full blown economy around that. So there is, if you have such an important artifact, and yet if you have forgotten the author, it most likely is because there is no author. So they qualify this particular thing. At least that's what my teacher told me. I have not seen this particular thing in any Mimamsa text myself, but that is the underlying thing, saying that it is important, yet it is, if it's forgotten, it means it was there. So I told them that it may sound okay on the top of it, but still, when you analyze further, I mean, it is still not a conclusive argument, number one. Second thing is that, see, everyone, right, even the Nayayika who doesn't accept that Veda is unauthored. Okay, if you have trouble saying Apaurishaya, just say unauthored. Um, even the Nayayika who believes that God is the author of this Veda, or even the Vaisheshika who believes that God is the author of the Veda, they both believe that the for human consumption, at least, right, at least within the human race, the Veda has been available to us through rishis, through people who have actually seen these mantras, or through who have experienced these mantras, who have heard these mantras, and along with all the swara and everything like that, and that's what they have given to us. Now, even they hold that rishi is only a, what do you call, a carrier. He's a communicator rather than actually a composer. So even that, those people who believe that Veda is authored, they accept the concept of a rishi. Now, just imagine: is the rishi going to tell his disciples, right? Look, this is very important, but I don't know who the author is. Is he going to say it that way, or is the rishi going to say, look, there is no author, because that is how my darshana is? So, and then based on that, how will the disciples tell their disciples, and how will the parampara get built? So, parampara will be built on the tenet. Rather, I mean, they will carry forward the tenet that there is no author, rather than saying that, what, the rishi forgot who the author is, though he has just seen the mantra. So it is very, very unlikely. I mean, it's not just unlikely, it is impossible, logically impossible, and even somewhere silly to have this kind of hetu. So anyway, we looked at all of these things. We said that prasiddhi is the only proof. We said that then we came, look, why can't it still be an figment of imagination? Why can't it still be an artifact of belief? So for that, we said that prasiddhi is the only proof. Now, prasiddhi means multiple these things, multiple independent sources, and we said that that is the only thing which proves that there is something can be authored. The same prasiddhi in case of Veda says that there is no author, therefore Veda really doesn't have an author. So that is the proof that we mentioned. Why do we mention this? We will come to that thing in a couple of minutes. Here the point is that we also looked at this particular thing, saying that all statements have authors. That is the basic problem that most people will have, saying that any text that you take, it cannot just come into existence as is, right? There has to be a person who has who has composed it, who has put that sequence of words to give a certain meaning. So without that author, there cannot be a sentence. So given that this is the general observation and applicable for all tests, so it is very it taxes your credibility to accept any such thing as an unauthored text. So unless this particular rule is wrong or has an exception, you cannot accept that. So our point is that, well, it does have an exception, and that the exception for that is Veda. So the other party is going to ask, why should I even accept that there is an exception, right? So the point there is that how do you accept exception in generally, and when you generalize something, how do you recognize an exception? So for example, right, I may see that cows have horns, a sheep may have horns, so on and so forth, and therefore I say hares have horns, or no, hares do not have horns. So there is an exception. Now this exception is pretty straightforward, right? There is a visual input. Based on that visual input or pratyaksha, you say that hares do not have horns, and through other people recorded history or whatever it is, that it has not been the case. It has been the case forever that their hairs do not have horns. Now, so exceptions in inductive reasoning, right? When you generalize something, you need to know by what mechanism you will identify or spot an exception and give it status as an exception. Otherwise, your reasoning is pretty superficial. So if you know that this is how I will recognize an exception, you need to understand, you need to put that framework for identifying that kind of exception. So it is reasonably straightforward when it comes to pratyaksha or things like South Indians love idli or whatever it is, right, or mathematical things. But when it comes to this, right, all sentences have authors. How do you know that there is no exception? To say that there is no exception, you need to have a certain way in which you will say, okay, this would have been an exception, I would have identified an exception like this, but there is no way to identify that, but there is no such text which meets that condition, therefore there is no exception. That's what the other person should have told us, right? Now, what, even if it is hypothetical, what is that way to identify an unauthored text? For example, if I write a text, which does not have an author printed on the book or on the, the title page, will it become unauthored? No, then that is a very straightforward way to become to create an exception, right? No. So if you keep reasoning it further and further, you will eventually come to say that, look, it needs to have prasiddhi, that it is never been authored, that there is no author. That is a true characteristics of an if there was an exception. They need to say that. Everybody will need to come to this conclusion. And then we say that yes, that particular condition is met in the case of Veda. Therefore, this is an exception. Therefore, Veda is an exception to this particular rule. And I mean, the same idea is applies to even Popper's falsifiability framework also, right? You need to say before you for example, experiment that if I find these conditions to be true, I will accept that my hypothesis is false. So the same thing applies even for the simple rule that all sentences have authors. So I'm trying to cut the chase here. We can go and imagine a number of other ways in which a reasonable person would have said that, okay, if there was an exception to this particular rule, which is all sentences of authors, I would have identified that text like this, or this would have been its characteristics. You go through all of those conditions, you will find that none of them are strong, and then you will eventually come back to only saying that, okay, prasiddhi is the only way, because prasiddhi is the way by which any of these historical facts, in fact, because see, this is the very important point. How do you ascertain history's what the whole thing comes down to at the end of it? I'll tell you why this is important, to which I will, before that we'll come to your question about why should you accept that why, what is the importance of an Apaurusheya text? So Acharya says, this is I'm culling out some sections here. Okay, nacha paurusheyana vakyana tat siddhi. Tat is basically he's talking about the dharma and adharma. So ethics and morals and things like that cannot be established based on a Paurusheya Vakya, basically based on a composed text. Basically, if there is one author and his word cannot be taken for, taken as pramana for dharma and adharma just like that. Why? Because it is possible that either he is ignorant, or even if he is not ignorant, he is maybe he doesn't even have the willingness to tell you. These are all assumptions that you have to make on top of that. So you have to assume, for example, a Buddha has to assume that Buddha is not ignorant, and Buddha is willing to teach them as is. And so no, but they say that they have elaborate arguments, both Buddhas and Jainas, right? They have elaborate arguments for Sarvajñatva. Basically, they say that how do I establish in omniscience? So they have elaborate arguments for that. And simple thing is, see, there is no vastu, there is no object. Uh, if it is not cognized, if it is not an object of valid knowledge, it is not. It is not really there. So if a vastu exists, there has to be. It has to become a valid object of valid knowledge. It means that there is a knower of that particular object. Otherwise, it is not a valid knowledge thing at all. So therefore, there is a knower. So which means that there, to keep it to you apply the Occam's razor or Kalpana Laghava, you say that there is one guy. We don't know who that guy is. There is one person who knows everything. So this is their argument for Sarvajñatva. I mean, this is Samanya Anumana. This is the at a high level thing. Then they eventually try to narrow it down to Buddha and all those things. But Acharya says that just because you want to accept his words as true, you are pulling out all these other arguments to make his words come true. You accept that he is omniscient. Nacha tadarthatvena sarvajña kalpyata. Do not assume that he is sarvajña just because you want to make his words true. Why? Because anyatra adrushtasya sarvajñatvasya kalpanam. You are making so many assumptions. You are making leaps of logic when you have to accept somebody's words as pramana. It should be, first he is, that kind of omniscience is not seen anywhere. All of us have limited knowledge. So on what basis are you basically assuming this particular sarvajñatva? That is one assumption you make. Then you also assume that, that person is not out there to deceive you. That is also an assumption. On top of that, you are assuming that, it is the same guy who has actually composed that particular text. So you make multiple assumptions to accept that one particular person has, even he may be omniscient, he may be, when you say he's omniscient, he means well, he doesn't want to deceive. All of these are assumptions. What is the basis for making these assumptions? Therefore, you cannot, and not only that, there is no pramana for any of these things. So therefore, you cannot accept any Paurusheya Vakya as pramana. I mean, as an independent source of dharma and adharma, or as a source of knowledge about atindriya padartha. So this is the basic thing. And Jaitirthru, he mentions many other points there. One important thing is, see, if let's say there is the word sentence 2 plus 2 is equal to 5, right? I say that thing. Now, this is obviously a mistake in the sentence. What is the source of this particular mistake? It's me, the author. You take any other sentence, right? Let's say you have composed a sentence, right? You say whatever you say, and is the flaw in that sentence attributable to me? Is it ascribable to me? No, it is only to the author. So if I did not compose a sentence or a text, the flaw in that, my flaws do not get into that particular sentence. This is the basic rule. Now generalize this for the public. What does it mean? If there is a text that is not composed by anybody, it does not have any flaws. So therefore, Apaurushaya text becomes a pramana. In fact, in Advaita, it has more prominence than even Pratyaksha and other things. Okay. In fact, when you see this in the arguments, right, they say that if the text is telling you that you are Brahman, you have to accept it, because your own perceptions can go wrong, but not text, because it is Apaurushaya, because it is fundamentally so strong as a source of, as a pramana that you have to accept it. This is the Advaita way of looking at it. Of course, Dvaita says that it cannot be. So there is a fundamental difference in how we look at which pramana takes priority, or how do you resolve conflicts over there. We'll come to that thing in subsequent sessions. But the point here is that is the advantage of having an Apaurushaya text, right? Now, you basically none of the flaws or a regular Paurushaya text can go in over there. That is, and therefore it is flawless. Can you have another text but which is composed have the same characteristics of being flawless? Sure, but you have to then make many assumptions about that the author being omniscient, about the author having good intentions, and the actually author writing that, composing that particular text which is in front of you. All these assumptions you have to make. For all then he may be actually telling something else, somebody else work also in front of you. You never know that, right? I mean, unless there is prasiddhi, you will not know that this particular text is actually composed by that particular sarvajna, whoever you think is. So there are multiple assumptions you have to make. So if you have to accept a Paurushaya Grantha, and even with, and I mean, so one, there is a certain advantage that when you accept an Apaurushaya Grantha, and there is a certain unnecessary assumptions that you have to make when you accept Paurushaya Grantha as the basis for any source of knowledge of any Atindriya Padartha. On the other hand, if you accept that there is something called as an Apaurushaya Vakya, there is nothing to imagine. Na kinchit kalpyam. You can see this third line, right? Apaurushaya Vakya angikare na kinchit kalpyam. There is absolutely nothing that you have to imagine. There is no. So this cuts down the Occam's razor. Basically, this is the most economical thing. Why? Because Apaurushayatvam cha swatayeva siddham Veda kartur aprasiddhehe. He says the Veda kartru is aprasiddhehi, means apramita. It is not known here. There is no pramana which tells that this is the Veda kartru. And when there is no such pramana, then imagining such particular that no, the Rishi is the kartru, or my teacher is the kartru, or Aryan is the kartru. All of this is basically unnecessary imagination. They are, you are violating the law of economy of assumptions. Kalpana Laghava, you are basically, it is Kalpana Gaurava.
Correct.
So therefore, you have to accept that Veda is Apaurushaya. I mean, it is like kind of obvious. Then, if you accept that whatever prasiddhi is there, that is true, then it is like very obvious that, okay, then it means that there is no Veda kartru at all. Then he says this, okay, no, but when you have Laukika Vakya, right? For example, this is important, right? Tomorrow, let's say you are walking on the beach and then, you find a piece of paper on which, there's text written over there. You do not know who the author is, but you still say that there is an author, no? I mean, you may not know who it is, but you will still say there is an author. Why can't it be the same for any Vedic text? For which he says, okay, Laukika Vakya, which basically any such Vakya, it does not have akartrukatva prasiddhi. You see, the Veda has this particular characteristic. Veda has the prasiddhi of being akartrukatva. Basically, it does that. There is no author over there. Okay, this is very important for our subsequent sections. Okay, why then can't you basically say that okay, you want that? Okay, no problem. I will now imagine this particular sentence, right? I will say, okay, today I sit in meditation, and then I saw this particular text which says that all texts that you have seen so far are false. You're getting my point. Basically, a new system of Veda I am trying to bring out using my revelation.
Yes.
So what stops me from making one such system?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very important because apparently in the second half of the 20th century, right, the 1900s, there was one person who apparently wrote down he saw some Veda and then he wrote it down. I don't remember his name. And in today's world, right, if you use some of these deep learning technologies, you can create or NLU or NLG kind of technology, which is natural language generation. You feed in the Veda, you will get a text which can look like Veda. It is not difficult to make one such thing. So on what basis will you say this is not Veda, and on what basis are you saying that a particular text is Veda?
Yes.
Right? It is this akartrukatva prasiddhi only. Prasiddhi, and in fact, for that the Acharya's answer is parampara bhavat. Such a sentence, okay, such a gudha kartruka sentence, such a sentence which has been secretly composed, but is branded as unauthored, it cannot be accepted as Veda because it does not have parampara. What is this parampara? Adhyayana, adhyapaka, adhyetru parampara. The teacher and a student, and many such streams. I will show you that particular thing here. See here.
Before you go there, there's one point to note here.
Yeah.
Very true. The argument is very good. Parampara bhavat is a very powerful argument, but does it not open gate to the following argument? That is, today, whatever that guy 1940 guy told us a Veda is not parampara bhava nahi hai. Okay, agreed. But if we wait for 5,000 years, it may gain prevalence. So potentially it can be a parampara bhava creating.
Yeah, can't you form a parampara out of nothing types? I mean, basically.
So it is still possible, right?
No, we will talk about that also. We will talk about that also. I have, something from the modern method there. I had earlier my own arguments for that, but I will first talk about this. Give me a few minutes to get there, okay?
Sure.
Can a parampara be created is your point, basically.
Correct.
Yeah, we'll come to that, okay? So here he asked the same question in a different way. Here he says that, okay, look, if I come and tell, look, I saw one Vedic sentence and and therefore it is true, you are therefore it has to be accepted, you reject me because there is no parampara. But what did you do when it came to Rishi? Right? The Rishi, the person, Swayam Pratibhata Veda means for a person to whom the Veda was revealed by himself. For us, Veda is revealed to us by our teachers. It is taught by our teachers. But for him, it was revealed by himself. I mean, the Veda itself revealed to him, right? If he says you accept that, this is a Veda Vakya, but if I say you do not accept, you reject it, what is the difference between us two, right? I mean, for example, if a Vishwamitra or a Vasishtha comes and tells, look, this is the Veda Vakya, you will accept it. On the other hand, you will reject if Krishna comes and tells that, look, I found this particular Veda Vakya. So for that, again, the answer is same thing. Parampara Siddha Veda Vakyanusaritvat. Very important point. He says that, look, whatever these Swayam Pratibhata Vedas have seen, it is already there within the Parampara itself, and it is in line with that. So in fact, Jayatirtharu, he says that, this is Veda Vakya Samanatvat. The same sentence already exists in this particular Parampara. So I have just put something there, okay? So this is there are multiple such teacher, student kind of thing. There is somewhere, you have a Rishi.
Correct.
Now, when this Rishi sees a mantra, all these other guys on the top, they come and tell, yes, it is known to us. Okay, that is the meaning of prasiddhi.
Got it.
Very important thing, right? This is not there, for example, in Islam or Christianity or even Buddhism or any other system.
Correct.
Here it is eventually all of them come and depend on one particular seer. So even if you accept that Prophet Muhammad actually spoke with God and got those things, it is only the buck ends there. You have to believe him and there is no other option. In our case, it is not like that. There is a stream of knowledge coming in here, there is a stream here, there is a stream here. The stream started with this particular Rishi. But why do we accept this particular Rishi statement? Because it is in line with what this parampara is telling.
Correct.
Very important point which Acharya makes. Okay, very important.
Can I make a point here?
Yes, sir.
Can you keep the slide?
Okay.
The teacher's Rishi said. There is another thing which I'm inferring from this diagram, particularly for those viewers who have had some exposure to various Upanishads, etc. In many of this, I think in almost all Upanishads, especially very short ones, you always have a scenario, a screenplay, in which there's always a discussion, debate. A group of rishis, a rishi and a group of scholars, etc., talking, And there's always a statement. He said, yes, yes, I have heard my guru's guru tell like this. I heard somebody else tell like that. So, frankly speaking, when I have gone through this, I understood as okay, there is some kind of endorsement by others. I left it at that. But when you explain, right, the parampara bhava and then connecting it to prasiddhi, what prasiddhi means, I think it makes enormous sense as to why those screenplay scenarios are there in Upanishads, because that established the very same principle. And that is the feeling I get. I don't know what your views are on that.
Yeah, I will see. Okay, we will come to that again, and just give me one more slide after this.
Yes.
Acharya's position is, there is one more very prevalent wrong notion, misconception about what even this apaurishaya means. Okay, we will come to that thing. Give me just 2 minutes. I'll come to that here. Okay.
Yes.
So the point here is this. Okay. So what this means is at this point. Okay. So generally, see here. Let me explain this particular next sentence also. He says, moreover, okay. He says he uses a chakara, which means it's a conjunction. In addition to this particular reason, the Veda Drashtru, the seer of this Veda, they have this particular gunas which has been told in the Brahmanda Purana. Vimshal Lakshanato Anuna Tapasvi Bahuvedavit Veda Ityeva Yam Pashyet Savedo Jnana Darshanat. He needs to have 20 characteristics. So in our Shastra, right, again, there are a full, a complete structure. I mean, in symmetric or, I mean, what is the characteristic of the best Purusha or, best Stri? There are certain characteristics that are mentioned. And, not just symmetry, it is about even the proportions and things like that. It starts with, for example, Shannavatyangulyah, which means that, he needs to be 96 times the length between, his, whatever this angulis. It is not same as inches, but is that, I mean, if you take it as an inch, it is almost like 8 feet kind of, height. So they need to have, very different characteristics, and they need to be doing a lot of meditation, and they should already know a lot of Veda. See, this itself shows that Veda is already existing within the system.
Yes.
You see, Bahu Veda with, and not only that, whatever he sees as Veda,
Yeah,
that is Veda.
right.
See, the point is this, Vasishtha has written, for example, a Smriti. He has used his own words, but that becomes Vasishtha Smriti. Vishwamitra has used his own words, that becomes Vishwamitra Samhita. Okay, but that doesn't become Veda, because they are communicating whatever they have heard or whatever they have seen. When I say seen, it is Mano Darshana, which is basically whatever they grasped at that point of time, whatever they heard. It is that they are repeating to their students, their disciples. That becomes Veda, because it is Jnana Darshanat. There is, it is seen as, Jnana Darshanat means it is an artifact, it is of perception of knowledge. Basically, with their knowledge, they were able to perceive that particular mantra. So the point here is that, people say, why, see, this Brahmanda Purana, so you may reject that, I could not, whatever I saw is not a Veda, because I do not follow this particular, I do not have these characteristics that are mentioned here. But then, what is the pramanya of this particular sentence itself? Why should I believe that Brahmanda Purana? Right? It is because it is aligned to the Veda. Okay, but then how do you believe in the Veda itself? Because Apaurishaya. But then when how do you know that there is no what do you call rogue element, so to speak, right within the Veda? Basically, there is something which is actually Paurishaya, but it is getting packaged as Apaurishaya. How do you know that? So for all of that, this is the main hetu. Parampara Siddha Veda Vakyanusaritvat, everywhere. Okay, so this particular thing, this communication is there, and that ensures that even if the rishis, if let's say I am a rishi, okay, I am a fake rishi who comes there and tells that there is this new text, all these guys are going to reject it, saying that there is no such text. Okay, please keep this point. So I cannot pull up a new text as Veda. New as in, something which is not already there in the parampara. Either that, so once I have accepted that, or once I have accepted that the line which authorizes the Itihasa and the Purana as the fifth Veda. This is in Chandogya Upanishad, right? Itihasa Purano Nam Vedanam Panchamo Veda. So the Purana gets accepted, Itihasa and Purana gets accepted as equivalent to Veda, okay, as an epistemological source by the Veda itself. Very important point. So this answers your, somewhere your question on, is Purana needed or not needed kind of thing. So you or me or even Ananda Tirtha Bhagavad Padacharya has nothing to do with that. The Upanishad itself has mandated that no, it is the fifth Veda. Basically, it is the fifth. It is equivalent to another source of knowledge. So there is, we have to just accept it and then move forward. But anyway, the point is, because one such sentence existed and that was in line with the Veda, everything else, even the Brahmanda Purana, gets accepted as a pramana. Why is this important? Because in our history, or in our Shastra, we hear cases of people reviving old or lost shakhas. For example, Yajnavalkya is supposed to have revived the Yajurveda, right? The one particular shakha of Yajurveda. In fact, Mahabharata mentions that, Bhagavata also mentions that. On what basis? And he receives it from, that is another beauty of this whole thing, right? He receives it from Aditya, which is the sun, and then he tells it, the text says he wrote it, Chakre Yajurvedam or something like that, it says in Mahabharata. So it is, so the usage of, he wrote it is also there for a text that he has received from somebody else. That is a way to say that, he has distributed or he has spread that thing. He has basically given it to his disciples. So the meaning of composed is not really in the literal sense, but it is in the Chakre Yajurvedam or something like that is there. So that line means he has distributed it. So even within the Veda, whenever you find that there are references to people writing it, so there is one when I'm not sure if it is in the Yajurveda or in the Atharva Veda, it comes there, mantra krit. It refers to the rishi as mantra krit. So for us, it means that mantra darshana krit or something like that, or mantra adhyapana krit. He has taught that mantra to other people. It doesn't exactly mean that he composed that mantra. Why? Because of this particular parampara that is there. Now, therefore, we accept this Brahmanda Purana. So the first sentence here, it ensures that our Vedic text corpus or whatever it is pretty close. Even if it is infinite, is close, there cannot be new additions. Therefore, I or you cannot conjure up some text which says that all the Veda that you have seen so far is false. And not only that, let's say I come and claim that I have seen Gayatri Mantra. Gayatri Mantra is there within the parampara. Will you consider me as a rishi? You cannot. That is again filtrated or constrained by this particular Brahmanda Purana. Please keep this thing in mind. Why it is important, I think we will come to that in some point here. Then Acharya says that, look,
can I make a suggestion here?
Yeah, please.
I think it's pretty intense. What your statements are very intense. So I would probably suggest you got the third slide, VTV and 3. I saw it. Is it the last slide in the series? So we might
5.
I think we should stop with 3 and leave it. I think it is very intense. Let's give in capsules which people are able to digest.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
And then I'll do one thing. Then I will stop. I will stop with 3 then.
Yes.
Then Acharya, in the later part of the Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, he gives other quotations from the Veda itself, which have this self-proclamation around how they are apaurisheya. Vacha Virupanitya. In fact, Shankaracharya also quotes this one in his Brahmasutra Bhashya. Then Acharya quotes other texts like Nityaya Anityaya Stavami Brahma Tatparam Padam Iti, or Shrutirvava Nitya. Basically, I praise, I eulogize the Parabrahma, right, with both Nitya and Anitya words. Nitya is Veda, Anitya is Smriti. That's what the next word says. Shrutirvava Nitya, Anityavava Smritayaha, Yascha Anya Vachaha. Only Shruti is Nitya, Smriti and anything else, all other words or all other texts are anitya, says the Paingi Shruti. Or the Katyayana Shruti says, Vigneyam Param Brahma, Jnapika Paramashruti. Okay, so very important thing here. See there, Shruti is now he is slowly coming into the what the content of that text is. Okay, so the purpose of this particular thing is also being revealed here. Okay, in fact, Virupa is a Rishi's name here. He is told, okay, Nityaya Vacha, basically use these words which are always there, which are eternal. So all of them are used in conjunction with praising Parabrahma. Okay, Vijnayam Paramam Brahma, Jnapika Paramashruti. Param Brahma is to be known well. And how do you know him? Jnapika Paramashruti. And the best tool for that is your Shruti. Anadi Nitya. It is beginningless, it is eternal. Sa, Shruti. Tacha vina tam na sagamyate. Without that particular Veda, he cannot be known. So you cannot say that, why should I depend on Veda itself to know God?
The way.
This is no other way. This is what this one says. Okay. Then Sahasrada Mahimanaha Paramam Sahasram Yavad Brahma Vishtitam Tavati Vak. So basically this one praises Brahma and says that the Vak is word, right? The text has always been there as long as the Brahma has been there. Very important, right? Both are equally eternal and beginningless. Okay, the Veda itself is telling you this. Kaschandasam Yogama Vedadhira. This is, a quip on people who claim that, it is authored and things like that. When people cannot make out its meaning itself, okay, how can you just say that, somebody wrote that particular text? So that's what and when it is so difficult to even figure out that meaning. Kaschandasam Yogam. Yogam means, what is it basically what is its meaning? If you do not know, how can you just say that, somebody has written that thing? That is the underlying logic that Acharya is telling here. Then he explains one more thing which we will cover next. This is important from a different point of view. So many people think that it is like these Vedic mantras or our sages are like scientists who are discovering these equations, right? For example, Newton did not create gravity, he just discovered that. Or Einstein did not create relativity, he discovered that. So similarly, our rishis, or they did not create this particular Veda mantra, they discovered it. So, or so there is a certain dilution that they do when they talk about that. According to them, the rishi just saw some truth or whatever it is and then wrote it in his own words. So this particular quote is going to remove that misconception. We will see that in the next session.
Thank you, Krishna. This is very intense, I would say, because particularly for many viewers, if not all the viewers who are not accustomed to going into the details of text, this is very intense. And the arguments are very, as everybody says, Acharya's arguments are very pithy. One word, two word, one sentence, but too much of import in every one of them. Therefore, let's go very slow and steady. But one thing I would request you to do next time when you start, I will also preface with the appropriate question so that we get the pointer. You have quoted Vishnu Tattva Vinarnya, right? Right. It's important for us to explain what is this Vishnu Tattva Vinarnya. Why did Acharya write this? I mean, he wrote Brahmasutra Bhasha, Gita Bhasha, Upanishadya, Rigveda Bhasha, also part of it, he has done everything. But what was the need for writing another text called Vishnu Tattva Vinarnya? That introduction will help, because Vishnu Tattva is paramount in all his writings. Now, to tell you very honestly, years and years back, when I was hypercritical on Srimad Ananda Tirtha Muni, 10, 15 years back at least, I used to think that it is more because of his emotional love towards Vishnu, he's making it. But as years and years of talking, debating, criticizing, more importantly, criticizing him, it became a revelation for me. It is, emotion is attached, no doubt about it. But not because he liked, quote unquote, because Vishnu Tattva is the centrality of the entire Vedic corpus. And in fact, I have delved into, Shankara and others, including modern philosophers, etc. And like what you say, Prasiddhi got established. people who believe in other forms of philosophies also agreed and endorsed, underlined that Vishnu Tattva as a centrality. And later, the very meaning of Vishnu being omnipresent gave an additional value to the whole idea as to why Vishnu Tattva is supreme. And in my own side dabblings with Einstein theory and quantum theory and other things, the origin of universe, cosmos, etc., I connected with several other scientific concepts, which is probably outside the scope of this conversation. But I mentioned it because even if you take a modern cosmology, a concept which may be called Vishnu, which may not be called Vishnu, a concept that the entity which is always present all over the universe, it cannot be seen, it cannot be detected, so on and so forth, is so very important. Therefore, that prasiddhi, which you mentioned as the means of establishing several key things, is there in Vishnu Tattva also. But I would request you, coming from a very traditional learning, I would request you next time when you begin your conversation, say why Vishnu Tattva Vinaya was written and why you are taking that as a reference. Why not something else? Okay, that will be very interesting. But thank you very, very much. I think you're getting into the really complicated concept which Acharya has thrown in simple words, and you're establishing very beautifully, logically, with slides, etc., which modern people like us will understand. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Krishna